These tubs here are the SweetPro 16s that we have out for these cattle. They've eaten through about half of these. They're the tubs that we put these cattle on after they get to weighing, 6.5 or so, 700 pounds. And then we'll keep these tubs out until we ship them. We'll have these same tubs out. We try, the reason there's so many around here, the directions say a tub to every 20 head, but I usually put out quite a few more than that. I don't like to have to go put them out. And it's not going to make them eat anymore. It just, without the weather affecting them, well, you can leave them out here, and as they need them, they'll eat them, and I don't have to be running around putting out feed constantly. And instead of putting out one to every 20 head, I may put out a tub to every 10, and it just saves me a lot of running and going and hauling feed, and I can come through here horseback and check my cattle and be gone and not have to haul this feed down here as often. Having more tubs than is recommended is not going to make them consume any more of it. They're still going to eat the same amount. And of course, some of these cattle they're new to the product, or most of them are, and after they get started on it, well, then as we move them up through the other tubs, the Kaf Kandi and the Sweet 16s, they slow down, and actually our consumption is probably less than a pound, and in a pound a day per animal. During the good times, it's probably down to around 3/4. And if it turns dry for a while or something or other, their consumption will come up a little bit. But I don't think we've ever been over 1.25 pounds on anything. On even the cows. In the fall of the year last year, before I weaned my calves, they were probably eating around 1.25 pounds or better, and we had the 5-mate 20s out, and but the calves were big enough; they were eating a good bit of it themselves, and the cows were eating it, and they were nursing a big calf, and they were carrying a pretty big load with a big calf on them, and it had got dry during the fall, and by the time we could get those calves weaned off of them, they were consuming it good. But that's not a problem, and as long as you're growing the calf is growing out like it's supposed to. On our mother cow operation, we feed either the 18s or the 20s, and these cattle are really fleshy here. But on our weaning calves, they're growthy calves, big heavy frame calves. They're not as fleshy. These cattle are really fleshy, but they're running on wheat. But we weaned some bigger calves this year than I ever weaned out of those cows. I mean, it's the first full year that we've had them on a SweetPro product. We, I don't keep out any salt or mineral. It's just straight SweetPro. They depend on it for their mineral supply. And like I say, some of the steers didn't fit with the cattle I was buying, because I was trying to buy cattle and trying to average 550 pounds, and the steers we were weaning weighed more than that. They were anywhere from 75 to 100 pounds heavier than the cattle we were buying. And you can see in places where I have those cattle, some bigger cattle in there that they'll be sorted into a different group when we sell them, which is fine. But they're the same age as some of their mates there that are 100 pounds lighter, that come off of different places that we put together at local auctions. The good part about cattle can eat a less desirable grass and digest it on the tubs to where they couldn't or wouldn't if they weren't. The cattle that we have running on grass, they're not as fleshy as these cattle out. They'll grow out and be big, heavy frame kind of cattle that, they always dock you a certain percentage if they're overly fat. And with the bigger frame cattle, we get a lot more framey growth out of the SweetPro product than we do. It's just not a fat. They just don't get fat on it. They grow a lot of frame and they're growthier kind of cattle. And you don't get docked on them like you do on one that's overly fleshy when you sell them. And you know, the feedlot people, they look for compensatory gain. Where when they put them on a ration, cattle have some catching up to do, and they have a quick gain for maybe 45 days or so. And if your cattle are overly fat, they put them in that feed yard on grain, they may not have a compensatory gain. They may have a period in there where they don't gain at all before they get on their ration and really take off. And they're sure not going to like that. So they'd rather buy cattle, big framey kind of cattle that are you know, healthy and everything, but not overly fleshy. And the calves coming off of cows are always that way. These cattle in the background here, they're pretty fleshy for this time of year. They probably will always be that way. I mean, I don't want them to lose it now that we got it on it, even if we take a little hickey when we sell them from being really fleshy. And they're not, they don't have a look to them like cattle that's been in a feed yard or anything like that. But if you sell cattle that look like they've been on a feed ration, they really will dock you. Usually the last few years, and I've kept a chart of it, usually the market on these steers, a lot of people are selling weaning calves in the fall, and we're able to buy them a little cheaper. And this time of the year, which it's around the 1st of March now, if you're planning on making a wheat crop, you're pulling cattle off of it. So there's a pretty good flood of cattle going into sales right now. And then if you graze wheat out, it usually plays out around the middle of May till the 1st of June, and there's a lot of cattle going to market during that time. And we try to hold our cattle another month or month and a half and then sell them after the 4th of July. And most years it seems like the market kind of comes back during that period of time, and we're able to, in my opinion, which is everybody's got one, it generally works a little better, but at the time it works better for us. Some of these cattle get so big that we may sell them early just to keep them having too big. The trends has sort of changed in the last year to the bigger cattle being a little more demand for a 900 to 1,000 pound steer that doesn't have to be fed so long to get him to weigh 1,200, compared to buying a 750 pound feeder steer and having to feed him 6 months to have him finished. You know, they can just do it in 90 days instead of 180. I was pointing out some hogs across the pasture there. That's one advantage in our country. We have lots of wild hogs, and the wild hogs won't eat these tubs for some reason. Anything else you put out, they'll just wreck your feed. If you put out a self feeder or whatever, they'll just ruin your feed overnight. But it's middle of the afternoon, pretty hot, and there's hogs coming in this field with these cattle, and that's a big plus in our country, because we're just overrun with them wild hogs. When we ship cattle out of here, we'll plow these things every time it rains until we sow it in wheat again, which some years we may run a plow through it 4 or 5 times before we go back in the fall. And we like to get all this wheat in the ground. And the old timer said to make wheat grazing you had to have it up by the 1st of October and up and growing by the 1st of October, and that's pretty well true. And you have enough growing season then before the winter sets in to have it up. And I like to keep it grazed, you know, down, not let it get tall and rank, because cattle don't gain on it as good when it gets big as it does whenever they're about the height that it is now. And if it gets too big and goes to putting out the tillers for the seed head, it'll quit growing. And when a plant puts out a tiller and puts that seed on the head, all of the protein will leave the plant and go to develop that seed, and so you lose the value of what's in the leaf. You know, like if you're baling hay and you wait till a plant is totally headed out, well then your leaf and your forage matter is not as good as it was before it headed out, because all of the nitrogen goes to developing that seed instead of growing plants.